Hi, my name is Madelyn Davis, and I'm going to be looking at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome today. And the reason this is an engineering case is because the ceiling on December 12, 2010 came crashing down and it ripped, and there was a bunch of snow on top of it, and all the snow came crashing onto the field. The Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome was used for the Minnesota Vikings, the Minnesota Twins, the Golden Gophers, baseball and football teams, and any other large events that came to the area, such as car shows, concerts, high school football and baseball championships. Pretty much anything that you needed a really large venue for was hosted in the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome. It was built in 1982 when they realized they needed a stadium for all of this, and they designed it because they wanted it to be really pretty from the outside, and they wanted to be just like be able to keep the players like warm enough when it was cold outside, because it was in such a cold area like Minnesota. And they designed it to be a dome that was supported by air pressure, and there were two layers of the dome. There's the outer layer and the inner layer, and there's a space between them. And they thought that if they pumped hot air in between the space between the two layers of the roof, that it would be enough to melt any snow or anything that landed on top of the dome. But it didn't always work that way. A few weeks after the dome opened, it started to deflate, and because of snow that was sitting on top of it, and rip a little bit, and they got that fixed really easily, and that wasn't a big deal. And then it happened 5 more times. Four of these times being in the first couple years it was open, and then the last time was on December 12th, 2010. And the time on December 12th, 2010 was the worst time it happened, because there were 2 days of just a really bad snowstorm that just accumulated on top of the dome, and they couldn't get it off, and they tried everything. They said the dome was about 80 degrees on the day that it finally crashed, just to try to melt the snow that was sitting on top. And it happened at 5 in the morning, which was really lucky for everybody who was involved with the Metrodome, because no one was in the dome when it collapsed, and it just broke and all the snow fell on the field. But no one was there to get hurt or anything, so that was lucky for them. But it happened because there was just so much snow, and it couldn't support the weight anymore. And also, they had done roof inspections earlier that year, only a few months before this happened, and the inspectors said that they needed to replace the inner layer of the dome, but the outer layer was okay, and the commissioner said that it was probably fine, and they didn't want to do it for at least another 4 more years because it was still too expensive, and they just didn't want to spend the time doing it when they weren't entirely convinced that it needed to happen. And it was the inner layer of the dome that had the problem when it did collapse, so they really should have listened to the inspectors that said they needed to replace it, but they didn't, and so it fell through. I think that this is an interesting case because they got really lucky and nothing bad did happen other than the dome collapse, and I think that it was not very smart of them to design a dome supported by air pressure to put in an area like Minnesota that was going to get a lot of snow falling on top of it, and it probably would have worked really well in an area such as like North or South Carolina where there isn't much snow, and it wouldn't have been a problem to have snow fall on it. But in Minnesota, it just wasn't the best idea for a sports arena. It was only open for a couple years from 1982 until 2010, so it was worth $55 million, and I don't know if that was worth it for that short a time. Now all the other sports teams had to find different areas to play and different stadiums to hold their games, and the area right now is getting ready to be demolished and build a new stadium over it with a better design.